Good afternoon. I think it's afternoon now anyway, everybody. And first of all, thank you for inviting me to join this prestigious and inaugural event for the Russian Demolition Forum. Just let me get the... Okay, that's me. I'm the Managing Director of RVA Group, a company that's project management and specialist safety, consultancy and engineering practice, but we deal 100% in decommissioning and demolition projects across the globe, in Europe, Asia, North America, etc. Okay. My former experience was in as a demolition contractor, so I do have experience of working on the sites and on the tools. And today I've been asked to give an overview of the demolition industry in the UK and how it grew from the 1980s right through to the present day. And whilst some of the stories and some of the slides that you'll see perhaps aren't 100% aligned with what's happening in Russia at the moment, I feel sure that you will find a lot of common factors and parallels with the growing market that you have. So to go back to how did the demolition industry start really in the UK? Following the Second World War, there was a massive amount of bomb damage, buildings, industrial plant destroyed by bombing, and the industry there had to come together and find a way of rebuilding the UK's major cities. So there was a need for fast local demolition and clearance of bomb-damaged buildings in many cities. And there was also an opportunity for entrepreneurs, businessmen, demolition contractors like yourselves to build a business, make money, make a lot of money in those days, and at the time there was very little regulation. And because it was post-war, a lot of soldiers returning from the hostilities and the battlefronts, there was a good supply of cheap labour in a depressed market. Lost Can we advance these slides at all? Does anybody have any batteries? Okay. Right. So the market opportunity. So there was a need to rapidly re-equip and rebuild the country, and this helped the demolition industry obviously to grow. There were shortages of materials because of destroyed manufacturing capacity in the UK, forced the demolition industry to become experts in recycling, and therefore bricks, slates, steel, all metals obviously, timber was widely reused. And that really set the demolition market on as the leaders in recycling, something that I think we can proudly say we are at the forefront of today. So what were the consequences? Well, the infrastructure of the 50s, 60s and 70s progressively is becoming and has become inefficient and no longer fit for purpose. There was a thirst for energy from fossil fuels, and this continued to increase over the decades. The power generation industry also had not only to produce more electricity, but create a secure distribution network for industry to flourish. In those days, all of the energy production was from fossil fuels, so coal mining output had to be increased to feed power stations, gas production and domestic heating. So there was a massive growth in industry, heavy industry in the UK. and also people wanted more, they wanted more goods, and that forced the mass production of consumer goods, vehicles, electrical goods for homes. People wanted better conditions than they'd had in depressed pre-war and immediately post-war Britain. And so the whole of the UK economy in the 60s began to increase exponentially. There we go. Okay, so what's changed over the past 35 years, bringing us a bit more up to date? The population in the UK has grown massively, as it done in most countries in Europe, and this has had an associated impact on design, housing design and capacity. Heavy industries continue to expand to meet an unprecedented demand, and bringing them to a massive increase in the consumption of fossil fuels to provide power for industries and homes. New materials, such as plastics, led to a need for world-scale, reliable energy sources, significantly in excess of the capacity of the existing facilities. So as far as the UK was concerned, the 80s was a great opportunity for the industry. The 1950s and 60s power stations were at the end of their life. They were becoming inefficient, they were failing, and so the first fleet of post-war power stations came onto the demolition market. And at the same time, chemical plants were outdated, creating a new work stream. High-rise homes didn't turn out to be the great solution to mass producing of housing. In many cases, they were a failed social experiment, and that again created further opportunities for the growing demolition market in the UK. However, at the same time, the health and safety consequences of demolition were also beginning to be realised. People understood that asbestos leads to fatal diseases. People understood that, it wasn't okay to hurt somebody. It wasn't okay to kill somebody. In the 1970s, it was an average of over one person killed on every power station demolition project. So a client who had a power station demolition project was accepting that we will kill somebody. That, of course, then was unacceptable, and today is absolutely more unacceptable. And therefore, things begin to change in the industry. So how was this change managed? Well, the answer was, initially, not very well. Contractors began to try to do more complex, large-scale, and more hazardous demolition projects using the techniques that we saw in the first slide. The same techniques for pulling down bomb-damaged buildings, recovering slates, recovering timber, and trying to use these techniques to, high, intense manual techniques to tackle, power stations that weighed 40,000 tons full of asbestos, complex structures, hazardous plants, chemical plants, was not the way to do it. And that led to a high proportion. I'm sorry about these photographs. I think the way they're projecting it, they've gone over some of the wording, but I think the corrected version will be available afterwards for distribution. So a high proportion of manual labour working at height or in hazardous environments. Personal protective equipment, PPE, was virtually non-existent. I remember the days when I started working in power stations. I started my life as an asbestos stripper, an asbestos remover, and if you were lucky, you got a mask to put on, but more often than not, people said, just get a sweeping brush, put some water on the asbestos, and sweep it up and put it into a bag. Somehow I'm still alive. But, you know, obviously these practices are totally unacceptable. And little attention was also given to engineering and design methodologies. What I ask you to appreciate, guys, is that we are an engineering discipline. We talk of ourselves as demolition engineers. And to be recognised as that, we have to engineer solutions to demolition projects. And it's certainly in the UK, in lots of countries in Europe, that has started to happen. We saw from Despe, before we had the coffee break, a properly engineered solution to a problem. Several years ago, nobody would have thought of that. They would have either put scaffolding up, they would have tried to use explosives. In that particular situation, and I would say that not every situation that is the solution for, there isn't one size fits all, but it's important that we start to look at how things are engineered. And in the UK, we've come a long way in doing that, in terms of every single aspect of a demolition project is looked at in detail. Everything has a risk assessment, everything has a method statement, and that is analysed and scrutinised to make sure it's efficient, it's environmentally friendly, but most of all, we don't have the situations, or we try not to have the situations which we all saw on the video in St. Petersburg a few days ago. That is a situation that none of us ever want to be in again, and we have to work very hard to avoid that. The other thing was that there was very little plant specifically designed for demolition purposes. Everything was adapted. All the plant was either for mining or quarrying or for construction, and it's only in fairly recent times that we've had proper long-range, high-reach or long-reach machines. We've had proper tools and equipment for either for shears or for grapples, and mini diggers and breakers that we can put on top of buildings. Everything that we should do, we should think, what's our first line of defence? Our first line of defence is to remove people from the workplace. If it can be done by machine, do it by machine. Machines break down, very rarely they can be repaired. People break down, they can't be repaired. So these are things that I ask you as a young industry in Russia to consider when you move forward. Health and safety has to be the prime driver at all times. And also, there was a lack of proper demolition-related health and safety legislation. There was legislation about construction, and demolition was seen as the Cinderella, the poor relation, and it doesn't really matter. If you're going to do construct a power station or a chemical plant, then the client would get structural engineers, geotechnical engineers, architects, a whole raft of people to design a plant. If he's going to take down a plant, he'll pick up the phone book and find a list of demolition contractors, or people that say they're demolition contractors, and look at it to see how cheaply it could be done. But things have changed. But at the time, there were consequences. And the consequences were accidents, fatalities, and it was, as I said earlier on, accepted as part of a demolition project. Clients were finding that projects were failing for a number of reasons, not just health and safety, but commercially. Scrap was being taken off projects, but they were being left with the concrete, they were being left with the asbestos. So projects weren't properly controlled. Hazardous materials were being removed without the proper protection, not only for the operatives, but to the environment. So asbestos fibres were being released, hazardous materials were being released, and all these things led to more pressure for the demolition industry to improve itself. And also commercial claims. Contracts were failing. Either the client was running out of money, or the demolition contractor was running out of money, and all these factors led to the industry having to being forced itself and improve its image in the field of engineering and becoming recognised as engineers. So what changed it? Well, a number of things, but in short, legislation and regulation. We all live our lives. We all live our lives by a set of rules. And whether those rules are in our personal lives or in our business lives, we have to have rules, otherwise we have anarchy. And the demolition industry is exactly the same as that. So it was time for the demolition industry to clean up its act and be able to provide a secure, safe and acceptable services to all of its clients. In the early 90s, a modern and fit-for-purpose suite of laws were introduced in the UK and Europe, and they are the sort of construction site, demolition site regulations. And these place the responsibility for safety not only with the contractor, but as importantly with the client and the client's designers, so that everybody had ownership and a stake in the game. Everybody was, responsible and accountable for making safety was enforced. And the consequences of those that decided not to listen to the legislation was prosecution, and sometimes with penalties if in severe cases that involved going to prison, long-term corporate reputational damage, and the impact on businesses. Clients were beginning to realise that if they have an accident, it's bad for the business reputation, it's bad for the shareholders, it's bad for the share price. When VW had the problem with emissions from diesel engines a couple of years ago, it damaged their business. When Shell Piper Alpha blew up and killed people on the oil rig, it damaged their business. And clients cannot afford to have this type of incident affect their businesses. And some businesses have even gone bankrupt on the basis of failed demolition projects and associated fatalities. So where is demolition now? In short, we are 1 million miles away from where I started this journey, talking about the post-war Britain. It's no longer viewed as the bottom of the engineering tree, and in many areas it has respect and is treated as an important and integral part of a construction project or a civil engineering project. Very complex structures are demolished safely using fully engineered methods. New techniques are being developed to make the process more efficient, and as I will repeat, as we saw from Stefano's presentation, and it makes it safer and it minimises the environmental impact. I'm an explosives engineer, that's my training, but I understand from looking at the methods that we've seen today and dismantling in some places, using explosives, the dust it creates, the environmental impact it creates, means that it is not suitable in many cases. Plant and equipment is constantly being modified, made bigger, made stronger, made more adaptable for the industry that we're in, and we can see that today with the sponsors. It's plant and machinery. As I say, plant, as long as you look after it, will go on for years and years and can be replaced. People can't be replaced. So that is another area where things have moved forward. And buildings and plant are being constructed these days. There's an obligation on clients building structures to actually build in the capability to demolish the building safely. There is an onus now in design for maintenance and demolition so it can be done cost effectively, but more important, safely and efficiently. Is the job complete? Absolutely not. There is still a long way to go in the demolition industry. There are still too many corners cut when dealing with demolition, and clients have to continue to take a responsibility in influencing the process. And that means that when a client is selecting his demolition contractor, whether it's doing it directly or with a team of consultants, he has to make sure that the contractor that he selects can deliver, can do the project, has the capability, the skills, the capacity to do that project and to deliver that project on time, within cost, and safely, without environmental impact. Fatalities and incidents are still too commonplace. I think Howard Button referred at the beginning to the numbers of fatalities that we see in the demolition sector. All accidents, in my view, are preventable and shouldn't happen. Most of the accidents that happen are not necessarily one thing that's gone wrong. It's usually what we would call a perfect storm. It's usually a situation where a number of things have coincided and gone wrong at the same time, and that results in the situation that we had in the UK 4 years ago this month. Time flies, but it's 4 years ago since 4 people were killed at Didcot Power Station during the pre-weakening of a boiler house in preparation for the use of explosives. So we have to continue to appreciate that whilst we are a lot better than we've ever been, we are still some way from making everybody that goes to work in the morning be able to come home to their families at night. This is an obligation everybody in this room has. You have it to your employees, we have it to the public. People have to be safe. And contractors should also understand that to grow and prosper, they have to be part of this process. If you can deliver to your clients good, safe demolition projects, then not necessarily cost is the only important thing to the client. The client needs people that he can rely on and that he can trust. And also the lawmakers in various countries, and I'm not familiar with, obviously, with the laws in Russia, have to continue to strengthen the law, to keep the industry focused on safe delivery, but also make sure that people that are less vigilant, that don't do good jobs, that don't work safely, are outlawed and thrown out of the industry. And this is one of the reasons why, as a body, the federation that we are today is important, because it's the old story. United we stand. As individuals, we are single voices. As a united body, we have strength, we can influence lawmakers, we can influence clients. You know, I've done it, my colleagues have done it, this is what we do. It's not an easy journey and it won't happen overnight, but it takes a few years, but you will gain respect, and at the end of the day, your businesses will prosper. The management of safety has to be recognised as a prime driver for all involved. So, I'll read the words. Sorry about the photographs. Investment in people is important, the right people. Training of people, looking after people, looking after the welfare of your staff, looking after the training of your staff, are all things that make companies better, stronger, and will still be here in 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Those that don't do this will miss out and they will disappear. Adequate funding should be made for all your projects. Everybody works under commercial pressures, that's business, and everybody wants to win every job that they tender for, that they put a bid in for, but it's important to appreciate that you need to make money. If you don't make money, you don't survive. Eventually you disappear. So projects have to be properly priced. You know, you've got to be competitive, but you've also got to stay in business. Legislation has to be enforceable, and one of the things there is that also, and this may not sound easy, but sharing of information. One of the things that I have picked up in the 2 days I've been here, and I understand it because this is how the UK used to be, is that every demolition contractor in this room will only be thinking about his demolition company. And I think that competition is good. Embrace the competition, don't be afraid of it. Believe me, there's a lot more projects in the market than there are contractors. As an example, in Germany alone, there are over 100 power stations now shut down, waiting for demolition. And so if we look at those, they're already in the market. What the market doesn't have, what the clients don't have, is enough demolition contractors. We as a company are struggling to find demolition contractors that can take down power stations, and gas plants, and chemical plants, and pharmaceutical plants. So, now is a great time for the Russian industry, because if you can improve, if you can get up to speed with Central European operating practices and the same standards, you've got an open goal there. There's so much work in Europe now, and there's nobody to do it. There may be 20 contractors, and there's hundreds of power stations in Europe, there's hundreds of oil plants, there's hundreds of chemical plants. So the market is there, the justification for investment is there. So there's a massive opportunity, and I suggest that if you miss it, it will be a very big mistake. Embrace it. One of the things that I would suggest is the sharing of information between companies, not commercial information, not sensitive information, but demolition techniques, why accidents have happened, how do we learn from them. We all saw the video the other day. What everybody in this room should be saying to themselves is, why did that accident happen? What went wrong? Was it the method? Was it the way the guy was cutting the roof of the stadium? I don't know. None of us probably know at this stage. But to find the root cause means that somebody else won't get killed doing the same operation next time. So it's absolutely vital that information is shared openly, and that is the only way to improve. There's no secrets about not killing somebody. We all have an obligation to talk about these things. We call them in the UK learning events. And this is how we learn. This is how we improve. And the same about new techniques. We've seen today, we'll probably see some more techniques specific. I know Jack's got some interesting things to show us in his presentation. I'm sure other people have. Sharing this information, it's not sensitive. It's anybody can go out and buy an excavator. Anybody can go out and buy the plant machinery. That's not easy. That's not difficult. It's how to use it safely. Those are the things that we need to share. So I would suggest that the mindset of I will only look inwardly at my company and not talk to the next demolition contractor, or not explain why somebody broke a leg, why a machine went down into a basement or a crane turned over. These are things that should be absolutely open and discussed. So, and the other thing, just to try and to close up now, because I guess I'm getting near the time now, is the industry has got to want to do better. If you guys out there don't want to improve, you will never improve. And don't misunderstand that. I am sure you're very, very good at what you do. But as a unit, as a federation, as an organisation, you've got power, you've got a voice, you can influence how the Russian demolition industry goes forward. And I would hope that you would do that. Okay? I think that's about it. Thank you very much.